you for being here. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here for our fourth day of FCI Live 2024. We're wrapping up the first of 2 weeks of this event, and this was one of the most requested and most actually registered for sessions we've had so far. You guys have always said you love these peer roundtables, listening to people who've been there, who've experienced it. This is Building Board Strength and Unity with Erin McClellan from Fertile Ground Food Co-op, Kathy Nash from Prairie Food Co-op, and Siobain Mitchell from Assabet Co-op. And we're going to meet them a little more in depth in just a moment. Real quickly, I want to thank our champion sponsors who have made this series possible for us. Thank you to Illuminate and National Cooperative Grocers. We really appreciate it. All right, so we're here to talk to 3 people who have been in the trenches and lived it, who I think of as excellent, people who have been excellent at board leadership and building board strength and startup food co-ops who have been in the same trenches you've been in. And those 3 co-ops, we're going to introduce them a little bit and the people representing them today. We'll go alphabetically, so we'll start with the Assabet Co-op Market. This is the one co-op here who's here today whose store is already open. They are in Maynard, Massachusetts, which is a western suburb of Boston. They opened, I'm going to screw this up, May of last year, I think, end of May. I'm going to let Siobain correct me. Siobain Mitchell's with us, who is currently the finance manager of Assabet Co-op Market, but was the board chair for many, many years. Could you introduce yourself, Siobain, and tell us about your co-op and your time with your co-op?
Yeah, hi everyone. So first of all, I want to apologize if there's background noise. As JQ said, I'm here at my co-op because I work here now. And I tried to find a quiet room. And this is the best that I could do. Yes, I was one of the original organizers. I was the board chair for a long time. I was on the board for 10 years. And we did finally open, hooray. And that was May 31st of 2023. And then I rolled off the board. And now I work here. So it's very exciting.
All right. Thank you for being here, Siobain. And I want to point this out with hope. The only person actually here who is still in the board chair role is Erin, and we are rooting for her for passing that torch at some point. But we're going to introduce Erin with Fertile Ground Food Co-op in Raleigh, North Carolina. They are in stage 3A, which means they have their site, and now they are raising the funds to put those shovels in the ground. So they have done their so they have announced the site, but no groundbreaking yet. Erin has been with the board. Erin, are you the first board chair, Erin?
I am.
That's like, yeah. You're the founding board chair.
Well, we started with a steering committee. And so I was chair of that committee before we incorporated and then had an election. And then I was elected as the first board president and am still the president currently until I'm unelected. Give thanks.
Okay, so Erin, you've been with your co-op for also over 10 years then in that leadership role.
Correct. The 10-year anniversary was the summer of 23. So this summer will be year 11.
Right. All right. Thank you for being here with us. And any updates you want to share about what's going on at Fertile Ground?
I would just say to everybody to keep an eye out for our capital campaign and how you can help send us the money to do the construction that we need to do to open our store. And we actually have a community meeting this Saturday. You know, we've hired an architect, we have schematics. We're doing a lot of work around public investment and a lot of fundraising, a great deal of fundraising. So, you know, I think that's the stage that you said it, we were raising money.
Raising a lot of money though. I want you guys to notice over on the right here, the highlighted piece of land is where they are building from scratch.
That's correct. That's correct.
And you guys own the land and the building, or?
We'll own the building. The land is leased to us at $1 a month for the next 30 years.
All right.
So we've gotten a major contribution on the land as a donation, and then we have an option to buy. or I guess it's called the first right of refusal, and this lease can be renewed twice.
Wonderful. Wow. So they are raising the money not just to build, build a co-op, to build from scratch a
Hey, how
building
you feeling? Good.
that the
Dawn, Dawn.
community will own. Please mute everyone on the call.
How y'all doing?
I'm trying to find the mute button. There we go.
You're all doing
There we
well.
go. All right, it happens. All right, thanks so much, Erin. And then let's take a look at, we also have with us Kathy Nash from Prairie Food Co-op, who was the board chair for a very long time, also a co-founder like Erin of her co-op, which I believe also Siobain was with hers, who has joyfully made the transition to new leadership, being in at least the president/chair seat. They are in Lombard, Illinois, which is a west suburb of Chicago. I put them in 3B. What transitions you from 3A to 3B is you're fully funded and you begin construction. They're getting permits now, so they're on the line. I gave them that B. And you'll see on the upper left what the store is going to look like, and they have hired their general manager. So lots going on there. Kathy, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your role and time with the co-op.
Sure. I love that you put these pictures here because the one with the scarecrow is my children when they were like in kindergarten, and my oldest one is now graduating from high school. So that kind of gives you the time frame of my involvement. So I served as the board chair for about 10 years, and this past board officer election, I was very excited to roll that role over to someone else who was very talented and had been she had mentored under, the assumption she'd take over for about a year. She's doing awesome. So I'm very excited about that. I'm still on the board, and this may be my last term because it's per our bylaws. I've served enough terms. We are hoping to start construction in April with about a 4-month build out. We are just finalizing, we have 2 grants, and so we're finalizing those, and we should have access to those funds right at the time we start build out by some miracle. So
Excellent. Everyone who's been in that stage where you're waiting for all the grants, and you secure the grants, like, hurrah, the work's done. And then everybody's waiting for those grants to pay out on the right timeline to get under construction. If you aren't there yet, you will be. Everyone experiences it. Thanks so much for being here, Kathy. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing these slides so you can actually see who we're talking to. And we're going to really just get into conversation. Now, keep in mind, your questions are very much welcome in the chat. I'll integrate them wherever I can. But I have some questions to start to interview these folks, and then I'll be integrating your question. The one thing is, so we have this request. They're like, we need stuff on board leadership, board unity, how you really get the board strong, how you keep the board seats filled, how you get the board activated. People just like strong boards, how you keep talking about the importance of strong boards. How do you do that? And so I wanted to bring the 3 of you, not only because you have been excellent. You all have real strength in leadership and governance and building a board rather than just doing the work yourself and leading. But also because your stories are not you're not without rocky times. Also, it wasn't all easy. So I was going to ask you right now, just as a group, if I said rate your co-op on its strength and unity, like from 1, like not at all, to 5, absolute perfection right now, rock solid, would all of you be holding up 5s right now? Is that realistic? I got head shakes from Erin, head shakes from Kathy. I can't see you right now, Siobain. Siobain says, oh, I bet you Siobain's like, I'm not on the board anymore, so I'm pleading the 5th. Okay. I wanted to point this out from the very beginning. Thank you guys for humoring me, because no board is at a 5 pretty much ever or for very long. Okay. It's just, that's just the truth of it, and we all go through times when it's going even worse. It's not even just a little off. So jokes aside, would you be comfortable saying your board is pretty high functioning at this? Yeah. After a lot of work. Yeah. We're going to talk to them in depth about how they got there. So what I'm hearing is your boards were not born just knowing what to do and how to be excellent boards. That didn't just come together that way. It wasn't just magical. I'd like to actually get into and invite each of you to talk about that. So if I didn't talk about a time who was going to put on the spot first. Erin, are you comfortable with me putting you on the spot first with the first question? Okay. I'll pre-warn everyone the order. So we're going to go Erin, Kathy, and Siobain on this one. So your board wasn't just born knowing and do what perfect. It took effort. It took time. Can you just tell us a little bit, like an overview of your board's journey, some of the challenges you ran into, burnout, and like how you guys developed and became as strong as you feel you are now?
It's been a journey. I think you said it well. We'll time me at like what, 3 minutes maybe. So you'll tell me when I've gone past that amount of time.
Yeah, I'll give you a little hand sign.
Yeah, that means good. So I would say in the beginning, we were just looking for anybody to join our board. Like we were, we're desperate for folks who care about the work that we were doing and would be willing to volunteer. We spent the majority of our time as a board with, as all full was a working board, and we're all volunteer. And there was a period where we've had different like project managers, sometimes some part-time support here and there, but it's been up to board members to drive this campaign as volunteers since the beginning of it. And that's been really hard. So at the beginning, folks, we would recruit people to join the board, and then we would work together and we would lose people. And we really have had to think about like why people are dropping off of the board and what is happening that makes it so hard to keep them. And one of the things that's clear to us that we learned is that we really put in a whole bunch of time. So not everybody can be on all of the meetings and attend everything. So that was one thing. Another thing is that a lot of times people not everyday people are familiar with what a board even is or how it operates or what its rules are. And so that we needed to develop the systems to train board members, develop the commitments to work on, develop the agreements. And once we began to kind of do that work, and JQ, you helped us with some of that. I mean, we had a couple of hard board meetings where there was a lot of frustration with folks. Some of it I thought was really warranted. Others I thought were examples of I would say folks that haven't had a lot of experience in leadership. And so just sort of doing that ground settling. Another thing that was challenging for us is we had the founding board members, and we have really good relationships. We sometimes can complete each other's sentences. So you recruit new board members and they felt like they weren't being fully represented, or like there was an unequal distribution of power, which is when you have new people and old people. So we had to address, and we're still kind of in some ways really working through that. And what I learned is that, people have different amounts of time, they have different boundaries with their life and their balances in terms of work and work-life balance, etc. And different ways of being. We're also different age generations, we're intergenerational, and that is another factor in how we work together across those differences. And I learned that some of the older board members that we would be communicating in is that we text all the time. We text night and day. I can't even count all of the texts over the years. And so one of the things that we had to do was move to Boardable, where we had systems that tracked all the kind of conversations and the emails and such, so that because people have different boundaries around how they want to receive information. And what works best for, say, me and Mother Janet, if anybody's familiar with Mother Janet, to text night and day, that doesn't work for everybody else. And so we had to set up different protocols around how we communicate. And that's still like challenging at times, especially if it's urgent. So I think a lot of systems and training were important for our work, and we're getting ready again to orient new board members that were just recently elected, and having to sit with right now how we're going to, continue to build unity. I would say COVID was also a factor because we started meeting virtually instead of doing all of our meetings in person, which we did for a very long time before COVID hit. So I think those are some of the things that we've evolved into a strong board, but it has taken systems, it has taken training, it has taken board members with expertise that they brought onto the board. Sometimes we don't have the capacity to pour that expertise into folks. We need people who can join us and help make our project stronger almost immediately. So then balancing training, capacity building, and bringing folks along. And the last thing I want to say is that we have really worked to stop recruiting people from the community that haven't been involved or on a committee or played a leadership or played some kind of engaged role with us. We have had people that, wanted to join our board and we've never seen them at a meeting. And in the past, we might have been thrilled about that, but now we've learned a lot of lessons and have had to try to incorporate those while still growing our board. So a lot of work there as well.
Excellent. Wow, that was an excellent synopsis. There's like 3 more things in there I want to ask you about and dive into. I want to just see if I want to capture a few points and for everyone else make sure they notice them, which was building systems, but it sounded like those systems were a process. It's not like you guys started with some stuff and then you had another conversation and then you had another conversation, and same with communication systems and figuring out what worked for everyone. I love that you named, and we've seen this in other boards, that sometimes boards are very tight because they do a lot of work together early and they have a hard time bringing on more people as they get, as the co-op moves forward. I loved that. And then you just made that last point, which is really interesting to see people consistently come to. Part of building a co-op is building leadership in our communities. But I think a lot of startups come back to me and say what we've learned is people need to get involved in the co-op and care at a certain level and develop leadership that way, and then come to us, not just showing up at the board with opinions and ideas, but with the ability to like work in a cooperative sense. And I think that's what I was hearing there.
All of that. I think too, we just have to understand that people are at different levels of commitment around our project, and for some of us, we are ride or die. And for others, we are participating, and everybody is needed. And so trying to figure out how to balance that is a challenge and also an opportunity.
I really hope we get time to come back to balancing that you have ride and die board members and board members who are participating and that you need both, because that's a really juicy conversation, because the people who run the core of the board are ride or diers, and we sometimes have a hard time figuring out how to integrate value and utilize people who maybe aren't. But I'm going to jump to Kathy and say, oh yeah, Grant's like, yes. Agreeing on recruiting from engaged people. Grant is the former board chair at Chicago Market, so he also knows of what he speaks. Kathy, similarly, a little bit about your guys' journey as a board. You had some dramatic experiences, I know, that really helped you guys re-strengthen as a board. Just wherever you'd like to jump in and share a little bit of your co-op story.
Sure. I think like most startups, it's the old raise the hand. Who's available to join this effort? Because you don't really have a pool to recruit from at that point. And so we did that. It was a steering committee at first that turned into a board. And there were some people on there who shouldn't have been on there. They were on there for weird reasons, or they didn't. What happened was there was a group of people who just didn't trust the process. So I'm a very process-oriented person. So it's like, we're going to follow the FCI guidelines for how we build this co-op. We're not going to rush anything. We're not doing a capital campaign in month 2, things like this. We're going to set expectations correctly that our store's not going to be open next month. It's a process. And there were and there was also an age gap that I want to call out. Like a lot of the ride or die people on our board were young. Like I was, 10 years ago, I was like 30 something, my late 30s. And some of the older people were like not happy with the amount of time, and they thought they could do it better. They did not trust the process. And so about a year in, it was like a year and a half after we started organizing, there were 4 people on our board who tried to take over. In an election, they threw in fake votes. They in kind of a pretty underhanded way. We had an attorney in our board who was not having it, and she was very like, "This is, we're not counting these votes." But they then were disgruntled and left our board and tried to open a co-op. It's literally 2 miles away from us. So that was really hard because we couldn't really publicly come out and say what happened, because it just makes everybody look bad. So we just kind of had to ignore them and do our thing. But it really underscored that we had to really focus on getting systems in place, committee charters documented, and not only documented, but shared and communicated, because it's one thing if they're sitting in your drive or whatever you use for your files, but it's another if people don't know that they're there and they don't know what's in them and they don't really know what the parameters and goals and objectives of committees are, because then there can be some toe stepping, which we've had a little bit of, like someone from one committee kind of wants to do things from another committee because they're excited, and that's great, but it kind of causes a little conflict. So that was a big hurdle we had to get over really early on. But I think that really caused our board to really focus on strong systems. Say another thing that happened is, this is more recently, right after COVID, we lost our site. And it was like a premier site. It was like a site that was right in our downtown area, and everyone wanted that site, and the community was like really excited about it. But it was something that was easier to get through because by this point we'd been 8 years into our organizing, a really strong board. We had really strong processes, and even though it felt icky to lose the site, the relationships within the board were strong enough to feel good about, like, we're going to walk away and this is okay, and we're going to find something else, and we're just going to support each other as we do it. This isn't anything anyone did wrong. It just happened. I'm very proud of the fact that we have an 11-member board and at least half of the board members are on like second or third terms, and each term is 3 years. And we have a pretty high participation of our board. Like, we don't have anybody on our board who's not either part of an active part of a committee or leading a committee. That is one thing that we tell prospective board members. We're very clear about, like, you're going to have to lead a committee or you're going to have to be actively involved on a committee. And we, before we run board elections, we make sure people, they have to attend either a board meeting or, better yet, like an orientation. No, it's not an orientation, it's an introduction to what service on the board means and looks like, and the time commitment and all that, so that people are really clear on what service on our board looks like. It is a working board. Some people are on other boards and they're not a working board. So we want to make sure we set the expectations. And I think that's resulted in higher quality people joining our board, because there's some people who, after they've gone through those sessions, have decided that the board wasn't for them, which is great, because we don't want people on the board who aren't willing to, give the time required. So even though we don't always recruit from within our ranks of volunteers, we've had some board members who've not been super involved, but they've joined our board and become really great board members. So I don't know how that's happened. We've been lucky, I guess, with that, but that's kind of our story.
Yes. So I'm saying strongly seconding the need for potential board candidates to learn about board service before they join the board. We're going to get into that in a minute. That's some of those practices that you guys feel strengthened your guys' board. So, and I love you gave a very nice, like, very smooth picture, but I think one of the things you guys have dealt with at your co-op, and I think you all three have, but like just those moments of like really, I call it the valley of despair. Like, the board gets to the valley of despair, usually in stage 2B. And, there were, I think your co-op actually hit that in multiple moments. And I'll ask you in the next question, when we get around the second round, like how you guys got through that. But I just wanted to point out that Kathy is giving a very like lighthearted version almost of some of what you guys have been through. And just real quick, because Erin touched on this, I know you said, making sure you see, people are trained beforehand, know what they're getting involved with. How does your board keep, though, that strength and unity, like just in the meetings and stuff? Like, how meetings alone can't do that. What do you think has contributed to that?
I think that, one, I think there's a very high level of respect for the people that have been on the board for a long time and the amount of work that's been done. That's definitely recognized. And I think people, they want to help. Like, they come onto the board and they say, the amount of work you've done is incredible. We want to be part of this. We want to be part of this process. And so people come ready to contribute. And that's been really nice. We've had very few board members over the past 10 years who were do-nothing board members, which I think is pretty rare. I can't even think of anybody. Everybody seems to really feel this ownership of being a director. And I think part of that is we are very trusting in who we allow to take roles on, because we have such strong processes in place. And we try to be very clear about expectations and what roles are, that I think it's easy for us to allow people to step up. And we're not scared of that. And I think people feel really supported and trusted. And so then they're willing to step up into maybe something that seems hard, but they feel supported.
Like that. Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to switch over to you, Siobain, and kind of the same thing. If you can give us just a little bit of your rocky journey to strong board at Assabet Co-op Market.
Yeah. Okay. So describing 11 years of craziness in 3 minutes. Is that the?
That is the assignment.
That's the ask. So I mean, I hear it, Kathy and Erin, I think, I would say very similar things. I think, in the very beginning, when we were just a steering committee before we were even a board, there were so many people, and it was the wild, wild west, and everybody had so much enthusiasm. And then, a couple years went by and people were starting to get tired. And it was starting to become evident too that there were some people who were doing a lot of work and some people who were not doing very much work at all. And so, we started losing people a little bit to burn out. Right.
I'm sure no other startup on this call knows what you're talking about.
And that's challenging, right? That can be really scary if you realize you're down to 4 people and you're like, oh God, we gotta get people in. But the kind of the worst thing that you can do, and we did do this a little bit, we kind of just grabbed people, right, who were willing. But that is just like the opposite. That's just the wrong thing to do, because what we really needed to do and what we finally did do was kind of sit down and try to figure out, okay, why are people getting burned out? And why are we having such a hard time recruiting? And what systems and agreements need to be put in place? How can we make the board a place where people want to be, even though it's hard, right? Even though it's hard work, making the board a place that people want to be, where they feel valued and appreciated, and where we all have this kind of collective sense that what we're doing is actually moving our initiative forward, right? So we had to do some work, not only around like the board culture and having good guidelines and agreements. This is how we're going to interact in this space. We're all agreeing, we're all saying that we will come to the board meetings prepared. We're all acknowledging that there are going to be electronic communications, that you can't just come to the meetings, that there's a certain amount of work that you have to be willing and able to do outside of the board meetings. So there was that whole piece. But then there's also the piece of like, what are we doing this year? And why are we doing it? And how is the work that we're doing this year, how does it fit into the big picture? And how is it actually helping us actually just move our initiative forward, right? And so we spent a couple of years, it took us a couple of years to really kind of get that really ingrained into the culture of our board. And once we did, it made such a huge difference. It made it possible. We had a couple of people that rolled off the board because of COVID, because of capacity issues. We actually lost 2 sites. And having that solid, grounded, engaged board that really had that consensus on what we were doing and why and how we wanted to do it together, made it possible for us to kind of get through all of that. And we opened. We did it. You can too, I promise.
So I love what you're speaking to there. How long, like, how far were you guys into the process? Like, what was going on in the rest of the co-op's development when you guys realized we are just gonna have to bite the bullet and invest in building a board culture? Because it wasn't like nothing else was going on. What else were you guys up against when that happened?
I mean, it was really in stage, it was really as we were transitioning from 2A to 2B. And we were realizing just how much work there was ahead of us. And just understanding and acknowledging that we couldn't do it all, right? That we had to really get more people in. We were going to be managing consultants. We had an outreach coordinator that was a part-time staff person, but that there were all of these pieces, and there were going to be more and more people that were going to be involved in this process, and that we were going to have to be coordinating and managing. And just understanding how much work it was going to be. We were going to have to do a capital campaign. I mean, we were, there's all these pieces, right? And there was no way we would have been able to do that. That increased workload.
That is so true. And you guys have done an excellent job actually answering several of my questions in question 1. So we're going to get a little more free for all here. But I think that's one of the ones that I hear great boards always come back and say again and again, is they hit a moment when they realized we are not going to get through 2B and open a store if we don't go back and put in systems, no matter how much. And some of you, Kathy's like, that was unnatural for our board. Most boards resist it. It's in our nature because the people who join boards of startup food co-ops are doers. And they're like, we'll just get the work done and we just have to keep moving. And we don't have time, to back into building these systems. Now, Erin, I'm going to throw this to you real quick because I know, the intergenerational thing I think was a real challenge, and you're not the only co-op that's been true, but like creating systems, finding the time to create them. It always felt like there wasn't time, is my understanding. And then finding systems you could all agree on was a struggle. Like, what, was there a moment of clarity as a board where you just like this has got to happen? Like, how did you finally bite that bullet and figure out how to do it despite knowing for years and trying for years? Like, you hit a moment where you guys really made changes. What was that like?
We had a moment where we had a board meeting, and it's been years now. So this is the previous board, and we lost 2 board members in that meeting, and they left like that day at the meeting. And one of them didn't have any experience on a board, and then the other was really frustrated at like our processes and how long it was taking. And the culture was, we were having I wasn't necessarily infighting, but it was passive aggressive types of behavior between board members. So it's like and that energy was awful. And then after that happened, we set out to start like we built board commitment agreements, and we started to raise those more often. And then we had new board members that came on, and they were actually the younger board members that were like, yo, y'all are tripping. So when I was talking about ride or die, I'm talking about some of the young people, like younger people, and even new board members are like, this is not a healthy work-life balance. Like, we aren't going to operate this way. So they were integral in pressing for us to create new systems. So the main thing they wanted us to do was have a system for the board. So that is why we're onboardable. One of our board members, it's a newer board member, really pressed for us to get that system in place, and we use it now. And at first we were like, rah, 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 but now we're like, everything's onboardable. It's all, your minutes are there, your calendar is there. We can communicate with each other within the system itself. And then of course it holds all of the communications. And so I think it was a mixture of like really trying to figure out how to get better, and then having folks that have experience with new systems to press us to adopt them. We also left Nation Builder and we moved to Donor Docs. So I don't know if folks are familiar with that system, but that's how we email our members and track our member owners, et cetera, because again, we were having real challenges operating inside of the system of Nation Builder. So I feel like part of it was we really needed it. And then part of it was the expertise, give thanks, kind of came to us in some of our newer and younger board members. And and they took on like putting everything into the system, as well as they send out all of our meeting minutes and our reminders and everything through that system now. So
And I wanted to point to, I'm really glad you shouted out some of those new board members too, that I think what happened there too that finally made it work. A lot of you boards are like, we've tried systems, we've tried systems, we've tried systems. They not only said we have to do this and said, I will get it set up. They made a commitment to supporting and training all board members through starting to feel at home on the system. Would you say that was, it seemed like from a distance that was integral?
yeah, they definitely have done that, as well as you know, change is challenging sometimes, and so they made the case, they set up the system, they maintained the system, and now it has become a core part of like how we are operating, or how our board is holding all of our information. Another thing we ended up doing was moving to our own Google Workspace. That was another thing, that's like they were like, listen, come on now, people, because my emails were my personal account for 10 years. So taking all of that information and putting into a system, because ultimately you want to be prepared in case I disappear. How are you going to access all of the material? So moving into like being I hate the word, but I'll just say like a professionalized entity over a volunteer, I don't want to say, there's a word, it's not ragtag, but it's kind of like just doing what we can do versus, okay, look, we're going to operate like, um, a real organization. And JQ actually also has been pressing us a lot about, because we're moving into a stage now where we're trying to get to where we're a policy and governing board and not a working board. Well, that's going to also require that all of your systems are in order for your staff to, with ease, manage your operation. And so I think there is a leaning into the future that we're doing right now as well that's helping us, because we don't want to be in the same situation as a working board. When we hire a general manager, we want that general manager to be able to run this operation with our obviously guidance and support, but we don't want it to be we want it to be an easeful transition. And so that's going to require us to create better systems, improve systems.
That's really helpful. And Kathy seconded you in the chat kind of accidentally by saying, oh, I'm a systems builder. That's what I do for a living. So you're both kind of saying, and then we needed to make a decision, and then we needed to also get people with the expertise on the board to keep us moving that way.
And support them, so I think that's another thing that we had to work on, which is if somebody has an idea and they're pressing, like we need to surround and support new leaders in their and in their strategies so that they have the opportunity to lead, I guess. I feel like that was an important thing too, like listening to these other board members and leaning into what they were asking, and it was not always easy. So
No, absolutely. And I wanted to throw it kind of to you, Siobain, real quick, because I feel like I'm hearing this parallel with Kathy and with Erin. I mean, was that you guys made the decision to have systems, but also was it the same thing? Like someone with the skill set also showed up and was willing to get that done, or multiple people? Was that also, because I think it's an important factor to mention. I think there are some startups who are going to say, who are watching this, we're like, we've been trying to have systems, and you all are nodding to, oh yeah, and you're gonna need the talent, and you're gonna need to support the talent. Is that also been your experience, Siobain?
I'm actually going to say no.
Okay.
Surprisingly enough, for us, it wasn't a single person with a particular skill set. It was really the work of us as a whole group, saying how are we going to do this together? And then really coming to an agreement to kind of put this stuff in place. I will say though, and I really do need to admit this right now. We borrowed some things from Kathy.
Forgot that.
They were ahead of us, and they were wonderful about sharing a lot of their documents and their agreements and everything widely, And we borrowed a lot of that and changed some stuff up and slapped our logo on it. But it really was through the conversations, right? And we had been using Google all along. So did we have people who were better at keeping that organized? Sure. But the systems that I think have been the most important for Assabet, it's not so much the technology, it's the way that we work together. It was the agreements that the people came to. So however you store your documents, whatever you put your passwords in, however you do your minutes, however people get access to that, obviously there are better and worse ways to do that. But for us, it was really a group effort.
And what I'm hearing from you too is, we have some co-ops that, Google's is as fancy as they get for systems and spreadsheets and so forth, but consistency, and thank you for pointing that out, consistency is kind of the bugaboo. I've also seen startups who build very, advanced, they have people who can build very advanced systems. They're using a CRM. If you don't know, you don't need to. They build like a database, they're like, and it doesn't, and it flops entirely. And I think the difference is that consistency. Now, since y'all brought it up, I know I already have Kathy's because she's a systems builder and has generously been sharing it for years. But there is a request in the chat, and if you guys would be willing to share your board agreements and just send them to me and I'll send them out to everyone. I'd really like to have yours, Fertile Ground, because your guys' are, I love that there's a lot of them, they're based on prairies, which prairies are awesome. And Fertile Ground has kind of built their own, and they're also awesome. And they have a different tone. So I think it'd be great to share both. So I will try and collect those from them in the next day or so and get those out to you guys. I'll email them all out. And if you have questions, now is the time. Go ahead and throw them in the chat and let us know that you have them. Otherwise, I can keep going. I think I wanted to talk about unity for a minute. As I said, I talked about the 2B Valley of Despair, and you touched on this for us, Siobain, but I wanted to kind of go back to others because I think a lot of boards think they look at these, you all remember looking at more co-ops that were further ahead of you and thinking they had it all together. And then now it's your turn. Everyone thinks you guys have it all together and you've never been in the Valley of Despair. Did your co-ops, so I guess we'll start with Erin again and then Kathy, since we heard from Siobain on this. Did you guys hit those moments where you're like, what are we doing? And it was hard to keep the spirit up as a team. And how did you face that? Erin, anything you want to share?
I would say that this period has been really hard. We've had two of our oldest board members have rolled off because their terms are out. So Jamu and Maru, no longer on the board. And Jamu was a member. And they extended my term on the board until opening as a vote. So they actually have adjusted the bylaws for me to stay engaged with the board. And we do have board members who have, like the treasurer and the finance secretary, who aren't sure if they're going to stay on the board. And so we are still like recruiting. We're in the process of, we just had an election. We have new board members. One of them actually ran a grocery store. So that's great for us. That'll be a really strong addition. But it's like maintaining the energy to keep going is hard, especially when you get to like year 10 and 11 and 12 and so on and so forth. And I would say like face-to-face activities have helped us a lot. We do human being check-ins on our calls, but we could do more to hang out with each other, I think, and spend some time together. So I kind of feel like that's probably the thing that's given us the most energy in our face-to-face meetings and strategy sessions that have also given us a lot of energy. And right now I'm feeling like that's probably what we need to do more, because we have really been grinding on the site and the architect stuff and the schematics and it's just a lot of things like that we've been doing that are work, but what we really are trying to do is create beloved community. And so that balance, like between working all the time we're together because we have so much to do, and then just kind of hanging out and getting to know each other and spending time together as human beings. I think that in this last session has been hard for us to balance out, and we have to do that more in 2024 to get us to goal, I think.
I'm going to ask you for just a minute on before I switch to Kathy. I don't think everyone knows what you mean by human being check-ins. I'm sure other startups do it, but it's been something I've really experienced in your culture that is seemed nourishing as a board, just to like remember your human beings. Do you mind just sharing what that is?
Well, we just do, we start all of our meetings with how people are doing, and it doesn't really matter what meeting it is. So, the first thing is to engage folks in what's going on with them, so you could get a sense of what they might need to participate. We find out all kinds of wonderful information during those check-ins. We also like listen to hard stuff because people are, life is lifing, as I would say. So, that's one of the things that we do to just stay connected with each other and to know what's going on with each other on the board.
I just wanted to point to this because I think other boards might say they do it too, but Fertile Ground, you guys run efficient meetings, and you have, we're not saying, oh, I'm a little tired this week, but I'm good, I'm here. People are actually taking a few minutes if they need it and really sharing the space to be a human being. And it's something that I'm sure I've experienced other co-ops, but really uniquely always remember about your guys' board culture. So thank you for sharing that. Kathy, so Valley of Despair, you guys been there, and how have you gotten through it?
Yeah, it's maybe it's like one of those PTSD things. We want to put it to the little box and not think about it ever again. So if it sounds glossed over, I apologize. It's just like I'd say we all go through, I think, multiple valleys of despair, but I think expectation setting has been important for me personally because we've been doing this so long and we've seen other co-ops be very generous in sharing their struggles and challenges. And so I think we've always known that there would be challenges. We haven't necessarily known what they would be, but like losing that great site, it's like, okay, at the end of the day, we didn't just maybe expect to have things go easily. And, Jerry, who's our outreach coordinator, always says, like, just expect the worst. That's just what's going to happen. So I think that maybe COVID hit, right? Like the worst time for a lot of people. So it's just, there are some things that are out of our control. Like, so we lost the site because we didn't meet our funding goal, and that was in the lease, and that was purposeful. If the community's not going to support this in the way it needs to secure the site, then we're going to walk away. And we were very clear in communicating that. And even I think we internalized that. So it's like, well, if the community is really as excited as they say they are, and we're from I would say a wealthy area, like not Lombard itself. We're surrounded by some of the wealthiest suburbs in the country. So it's like if people, the money's there, and if people are that excited about it, they're going to put their money on it. And we did do a good job. We didn't do though enough. And so to me, it's like, well, it's not a failing on our part. And I don't think anyone felt it was. It just, the community didn't step up in the way they needed to for whatever reason. Maybe we could have done some things differently to get a little bit more money, but it was like, oh, well. And then I will say it helped. So we had Dan Arnett, who is Chicago Market's awesome GM, come out, and he looked at the site and he kind of did a video for us. And he looked at that parking lot. He's like, I don't think it'd be a bad thing if you lost this site. So that also stuck in our head. And, looking back on it, it was a good thing we lost the site because the parking lot is going to be a terrible mess for a full service grocery store. And I think people would have driven right past it. So we also had little nuggets in there, if it doesn't work out, oh, well, we didn't have a backup site, but it was also we have worked too long, and it is a long time, but to walk into something because it's easy and quicker. And I think everyone on the board has that mindset. And also, like I said, the expectation of we've seen other people flounder and, things happen that are out of your control, and it is what it is. We're just going to, put our heads down and try to figure out the next step and put one foot in front of the other and hope for the best.
Really good points. And I want to point out to everyone who's on this call, because I know we have a bunch of people who are early stage one. All of these co-ops organized for 10 years or more to get open. And unfortunately for them, this generation of startups particularly hit every crisis that has ever hit the startup community. There was first the funding crisis that happened, where all of a sudden funders that were really bullish on food co-ops, they funded a bunch of innovative, new, unusual projects that were unproven, and those didn't work out, so they stopped funding startups, even though some startups had really solid financial performance. So that was a challenge. And then we hit COVID, and I could list several. We just like challenge after challenge, and they learned these lessons and passed them on to the next generation. And then you see Fredericksburg opened in 5 years. Gem City opened in 3 years. And so I just want to give the nod. First off, don't panic. It doesn't take 10 years for everyone. But also, I don't want to use them as a cautionary tale. I want to give the nod to this generation of startups that they have built so much strength and truth. There was a moment where everyone stopped funding. They really stopped funding startups. And it used to be just, shoo-in that was going to happen. We were up and coming, and Prairie's board asked to meet with me. And I was like, their pro forma is now undoable. They're going to tell me they have to fold. And they asked me some good, intelligent questions. They pushed and they pulled. And then like a week later, they're like, heck with it. We're doing it. We're going to innovate. We're going to find solutions, and we're going to keep pushing forward. So I just want to give the nod to this whole generation of board leadership of startup food co-ops, that they have found solutions and dug deep over and over again that are now benefiting a lot of folks who are now in this room, because it often doesn't get spoken. So like, not everyone's going to take 10 years. If it doesn't take 10 years, maybe just remember a little thank you in your heart to some of the people who are on the call today, because they faced a lot of that down. So I want to check. We have a couple more questions. We have time for a couple questions before we go. Don't settle. Yeah, don't just settle because a few owners are complaining the site is not what they want. We're not going into the site combo, but amen to that. Yes, and yeah, Kathy, it's like not just that COVID slowed down organizing, it increased prices 30 to 40%. Actually, we are now nationwide seeing it was 45%. It increased the price of building your store nationwide. Some of you were seeing 30, some of you were seeing 60. So like just crisis after crisis. There was also the GM crisis, where we had lots of GMs available, or most projects were getting GMs from experienced food co-ops, and then they just kind of dried up. Luckily, a lot of folks are getting them again, but it was a real crisis. So yeah, a lot of that was faced, and you guys held strong through all of it. Any advice? I knew this was going to come up, and I really do I'm glad this came up. Everyone's always struggling to recruit good board members, and you all mentioned you had to put some real energy in there. Does anybody have any quick thoughts they want to share? Like each of you, maybe, just a minute on things wisdom you've come to on recruiting good board members, even if you don't completely agree with each other. That's okay.
So after we ran our capital campaign, we had 2 board members who are really well connected with some of the higher donors to our campaign, who hadn't been super active, but they gave a lot of money. So they kind of reached out to them for board, to recruit them as board members. I think we got 3 of those people that they recruited to join the board, and they were, for the most part, very, they did a lot of great work, but only one stuck around. So I guess I would say that as a cautionary tale. They were very interested, and they love the co-op, obviously, because they gave them money, but they don't always have the time, especially the higher donor people can be busy. So maybe don't target them.
High donor people
Yeah.
and people who are like lawyers and things, like they're wonderful advisors. Don't put them on boards. They are too busy. I love that little nugget of knowledge. Siobain, do you have anything you want to share? Just nugget of knowledge on recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd say is a lot of people think, oh, again, just like you were saying, oh, it would be great if we had an attorney, or, oh, it would be great if we had an accountant. But if the accountant is the person who's going to sit over there and be kind of a jerk and not do anything, you don't want that person on your board. And so I feel like it's the job of the board, of any board, is to figure out what strengths you do have, and what, like capacity and professional competencies you do have on the board, and use them. And then whatever you don't have on the board, you go outside and you get. And if you don't have an accountant, that's fine. You can hire a bookkeeper, right? Because I feel like the most important thing is having board members that are engaged, willing to do the work, willing to do professional development and get educated and do prep, right? So for
Mhm.
me, I don't think it's necessarily like, would it be great to have somebody who is a marketing professional or an HR professional? Well, absolutely, sure. But having that solid unified board is the most important thing to my way of thinking,
Great.
right?
I want to give
And you
just a
can
last minute
go
here
and
to Erin. Sorry, we're
yeah,
that tight.
no,
Erin,
no, we're
any
good.
nugget of wisdom you want to leave us with on board recruitment?
I think they said plenty about that. I think it's also maintaining the strong boards members that you have. And there's like a lot of work to do that so that new board members are coming into an environment that they're they feel welcomed and feel supported in. So I do want to say that it is important to have strong recruitment processes, endorsements, have them come from committees, etc. The other thing is that orientation and maintaining so that they'll stay, because I feel like you can bring people on, but the real work is
Mhm.
getting them to stay and be able to like bring their brilliance to the work that you're doing. And I also want to just give thanks. We have the strongest board we've ever had, even in our disagreements and some challenges. We have like amazing board, and it took years to develop that board. So we'll have to put a lot of time to be able to keep that momentum going as board members shift off.
We're not going to have time to get into that one today, Dr. Flynn, although those who can, and I did not ask our speakers ahead of time if they can stay, probably most of them can't. If anyone can stay, we're going to wrap this. First off, let's just thank Erin and Siobain and Kathy so much for giving up their very, very busy time to be here and share their experiences with everybody. And I'm going to officially wrap up the video. Those who want to stay and continue to discuss are going to be welcome to do that after we stop the video. So our greatest thanks to them. We have 2 more sessions coming up today. If you have not yet done anything, learned about understanding using your pro forma as a board member, as a tool, and you don't have a lot of experience, like once you get that thing, come to the session with Sarah Leverts and Don Maffett of Colluminate today on that, or send your new board members who need to learn about that. And then I'm really excited. We have the wrong person on the slide, have the choice. Gabby Davis, who is phenomenal from National Co-op Grocers, is going to be here talking about supporting neurodiverse staff and customers. She does, if you missed her session that we did in the last FCI Live about talking about what good food means and a lot of the layers of classism and racism that are in that, it's phenomenal. Go back and watch that from our last series. You're not going to want to miss this. She's an amazing thinker and speaker. So she'll be here with us tonight. And then we have a whole 11 more sessions next week, and we hope to see you all here for many of them. And last but not least, we just need to thank our sponsors once again. We have our champion sponsors, Colluminate and National Co-op Grocers, but a lot of organizations stepped up to make this possible, and we are grateful to them. And now if I can